We are flying over Washington, District of Columbia, capital of the United States.
Wait, pause right there. We can't see it in this old footage, but let's zoom in a little and head a little forward in time to the top of the United States Capitol building. What we're looking at here has many names: Armed Freedom, Freedom Armed in War and Peace, or the Statue of Freedom. For now, I'm just going to call it Freedom. Freedom stands on top of the United States Capitol building, the heart of our representative democracy. But freedom wasn't supposed to look like this. This is what Thomas Crawford, the sculptor who designed the statue, originally intended freedom to look like. This design, with the laurel and wreath, was determined to be too short for the Capitol dome, so a new model had to be created. The main differences here include the addition of the fasces, a symbol of authority in ancient Rome, a globe circled by the de facto motto of the United States at the time, E pluribus unum, out of many one, and the addition of a cone-shaped hat surrounded by stars called a liberty cap. This design was also rejected, which is how we ended up with the final design, which would become the nearly 20-foot tall Freedom that stands on top of the Capitol building today. Conspicuously absent from the final design is the liberty cap, replaced instead with a helmet. The story of how we got from this design to this design is about more than aesthetic preferences. It's about 19th century American politics. It's about different conceptions of freedom. And it's about what, in the view of a man who would personify one of the darkest chapters in my nation's history, what it means to be an American. To understand the history of the Statue of Freedom, you have to understand the history of a funny-looking hat called a pileus. The pileus was a kind of brimless hat that was sometimes worn in ancient Rome. Similar kinds of hats existed throughout history, which is why you might sometimes see the pileus referred to as a Phrygian cap. Crucially, this kind of hat was associated with freed slaves in ancient Rome. Whenever they received their freedom, they would be given a pileus. The Roman goddess of liberty, Libertas, was also associated with the pileus. As you can see here, she's depicted holding a pileus as well as a rod, which was also used in the process of freeing a Roman slave. That's how in the Roman Republic, the pileus became associated with freedom and liberty. When Brutus and the other conspirators assassinated Caesar, they actually carried a pileus on the end of a spear as a symbol of freedom. This coin was minted commemorating the assassination of Caesar. It shows the pileus between two daggers and the words Ide Mar, meaning Ides of March, the day that Caesar was assassinated. You might have known this already thanks to the immortal words of Shakespeare, "Beware the Ides of March." And this is how, in the 18th century, the pileus got its association with liberty and republicanism, as in advocating for a republic in opposition to a monarchy. By this time, it had also acquired another new name, the liberty cap. The liberty cap was an important symbol in the American Revolution as well as in many other New World revolutions. Haiti's coat of arms contains the liberty cap. However, the liberty cap is most famous for its use during the French Revolution. Revolutionaries adopted the liberty cap, or as they called it, the bonnet rouge, in force. In 1792, the people even forced the king to wear the liberty cap. Maybe most famously, the 1830 painting Liberty Leading the People also features the liberty cap. But back in America, nearly 80 years have passed since 1776 and the Declaration of Independence, and the process of designing the U.S. Capitol building is underway. This design for a Statue of Freedom has just been sent to the man overseeing the entire construction project at the Capitol, Secretary of War to President Franklin Pierce, Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis, slave owner and future president of the Confederate States of America. When he was presented with the second model, his reaction was overwhelmingly negative. He specifically objected to the inclusion of the liberty cap, saying, "Its history renders it inappropriate to a people who were born free and should not be enslaved." But of course, we weren't one united people born free. Davis's argument ignores the United States' own founding story, a nation predicated on winning independence from a monarchy and a government that did not represent it. Through that lens, it's clear that Davis's objections to the inclusion of the liberty cap on the Statue of Freedom were nothing more than the sensitivities of a man who couldn't abide any perceived slight toward the vile ideology and practice that he later in life would cleave his own nation in half, failing to protect. The liberty cap was given to freed slaves, and Jefferson Davis didn't believe that freedom should ever even be conceived of as to include the people that he owned. So what do we get instead? Instead of a cap representing liberty, we got Jefferson Davis's suggestion, a helmet, traditionally associated with goddesses of war like Bellona, decorated with feathers apparently intended to represent Native Americans, but in my opinion, it's hard not to see this particular addition in the context of 19th century crimes against Native Americans committed by the United States. The Statue of Freedom, as completed according to the architect of the Capitol, actually contains no symbols traditionally associated with freedom or liberty. These changes were post hoc rationalized as representing freedom being ready to defend the nation, but soon it would be the nation that was defending freedom. Jefferson Davis, along with the Confederacy that he led, declared war on the Union, principally in order to protect the institution of slavery. And so it went that in the middle of the Civil War, Jefferson Davis's vision of freedom was brought to life by slave labor. Philip Reid was a master craftsman who, while enslaved, was instrumental in bringing the Statue of Freedom to life, along with multiple other iconic statues. In 1862, President Lincoln signed an act emancipating slaves in Washington, D.C., and Philip Reid was freed, and was free whenever the statue was hoisted into place later that year. Freedom's helmet was the vision of one man who would go on to betray his nation in service of protecting slavery, but as much as Jefferson Davis hated the Liberty Cap on the Statue of Freedom, he couldn't purge it entirely. In the Capitol building alone, we can still see the Liberty Cap in the Senate pediment, on murals, and on doors. The Liberty Cap also lives on in the seal of the United States Senate and in the emblem of the Department of the Army. It's on currency like the walking Liberty $50, and it's on personifications of the United States in war propaganda posters. In 2024, the Paris Olympics will actually be represented by these guys called the Phrygias. Look familiar? Whether you want to call it a pileus, a Phrygian cap, a bonnet rouge, or a Liberty Cap, it's a symbol of freedom over 2,000 years old that, like any good idea, just refuses to die. Maybe one day we'll be able to reward the Statue of Freedom for all her hard work protecting the nation by giving her her hat back. But for now, be on the lookout for the Liberty Cap. You'll find it everywhere. Appreciate it for its history and what it represents. Symbolism is all around us, and where we choose to use which symbols and for what reason can say a lot about who we are as individuals, as a culture, and as a nation. Hey, it's Ryan. Thanks for taking the time to watch my short little video here about the history of the Statue of Freedom and the Liberty Cap. Tell me about a symbol you think is interesting in the comments, and feel free to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks. Have a good day.